Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast with Ron and Kristin, where leadership meets entertainment. This podcast features stories with names and certain aspects that have been changed to keep submissions private. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to another episode of the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast, where leadership meets entertainment. I'm Kristin, and I'm joined by my confident but not arrogant co-host, Ron Ward. I can't help myself. Ron, your introduction is going to make a lot more sense to folks in just a minute here. But today we're going to discuss a topic that is crucial for anyone in a leadership position or aspiring to be: the difference between confidence and arrogance.
There you go. Now my introduction makes sense.
And I understand you're heading off to Austin next week to conduct training. I have never been to Austin. You did this not too long ago, right?
I was in, here's the funny part. I always wanted to visit Austin. Then I got 2 speaking gigs in Austin. But it turns out the actual place I was speaking was 45 minutes outside of town. So I basically saw the Austin airport. So this one is in the heart of downtown Austin. So
Sweet.
I'm pretty excited about that.
Oh, yeah.
I'll have heartburn for a couple of days, but other than that, it's going to be groovy.
Absolutely. That sounds amazing. What's up with the heartburn? What's the dish that you're going to...
I love hot, not often, but when I'm in Texas, I go to some great Mexican restaurants. I get hot and spicy, and I like to sweat while I eat. It's just...
You're like, is that a sin or... Yeah, it sounds amazing.
And on your end, you're emceeing a big event later.
Yeah, tonight.
Tell us about it.
It's going to be great. So this is the second event that I'm moderating for this group, and it's a pro-life group. And basically, we're going to have a panel of doctors, and I'll be asking them questions and making sure the conversation carries on, and the questions don't go over a couple minutes, right? As the moderator has to do, have to cut people off sometimes. But I'm looking forward to it. It's always great to hear from different voices, and it's a great cause. So yeah, that's this evening. It's always a class act. The CEO that puts it on does a great job. Happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, that's great. All right, get us started, Kristin.
All right, let's do it. So we often hear about confidence as a desirable trait for leaders, which, right, I think we both could agree, Ron, that it is. That's what we're looking for when we're looking for leadership qualities. But what happens, this is a question we need to ask ourselves, what happens when that confidence crosses a line into arrogance? And we've all seen it. Let's unpack this a bit, Ron.
Yeah, let's do. Let's first, let's define the two.
Yeah.
So according to online dictionaries, confidence is that inner assurance that you have the skills, knowledge, and ability to succeed. It's the calmness in your decision-making and the ability to inspire trust in others. And I thought that was a great definition, because there's nothing, I always say this, there's nothing like seeing chaos and watching a confident leader walk in the room, organize, bring stability and encouragement. It's a cool thing. Now,
I have to point out, before we go into arrogance, Tom Homan, I don't know if you saw this, but literally he has all of these protesters screaming at him because he's the one in charge of the deportations, right? He's our border czar. And he's eating an apple while he's being screamed at by hundreds of protesters. Now, talk about a calmness. I looked into the psychology behind it, because everyone thought it was hilarious that someone could continue digesting in a state of like a stressful situation. And there's a whole psychology behind it, right? Because the stomach is the second brain. And usually if the brain was inflamed, it's going to go right to the stomach. But so when you talk about calmness, it made me think about that. If you can still digest while you're being yelled at by hundreds of people, I'd say you have that calm confidence.
Yeah, people on the other side would strongly tell you that's arrogance. I get it.
Yeah, maybe
I
on
get
the
it.
bridge.
Oh.
But
On the other hand, arrogance is an overestimation of one's own abilities, often accompanied by a dismissive attitude towards others. It's that kind of brash persona that can easily alienate team members and create a toxic work environment. And Kristin, I don't know if I think you worked you said a call center one time, but there's nothing worse than working for, number one, an arrogant leader, but the aftermath of that toxic work environment. It's horrible.
And absolutely. Yeah. No, I have to like on that, I managed this call center and it was an outbound call center. So just call it a telemarketing outfit, right? And I was one of the managers. I was very young. I was like 20, 21. And it was like 9/11, like September 11th, 2001. And we were still forced to make these outbound calls. And when someone said something like, "Do you know what's happening?" And I went to the owner and I was like, "Look, I don't think we should be making these calls." And he was like, "You're going to continue making these calls. You can hand out turbans if you want. I don't care." Right? So that arrogance, that dismissiveness, it was disgusting. I should have walked out right then.
Yeah, yeah. So I know leaders who take pride in a company's failure after they leave or retire. I was talking to someone one time and they're like, "Yeah, when I left, that place fell apart." And that is a sure sign of arrogance and maybe a little
Yeah.
narcissistic. I
Yeah.
can say this, Kristen, that I wanted the academy to succeed when I left, and I call the academy director not to check up on her, to check in on her, but I want it to be successful. Like I
Right.
hope I helped lay a foundation that goes on year after year. So
Right.
anyway,
Right.
that's such a selfish, self-centered attitude to want something to fall apart after you leave.
Yeah, that generally goes hand in hand with like a low self-esteem
Yeah.
leader, which those absolutely do exist. And yeah, to your point, Ron, you want your department to run smoothly when you're not there. You want it to be a non-event, and that's a sign of success, not that it fell apart because you were gone for one day. That shows that you haven't delegated, you're holding on to everything yourself so that you feel important. And that is not leadership.
No, it's not. I had someone tell me, interesting you brought that up. It was a great quote, but it says, your leadership is gauged when you're away,
Yes.
not when you're present. And
Yeah,
if things can function without you, it's usually a sign of a good leader.
exactly. So, okay. So in the day-to-day world, how can we spot or recognize the difference between these two?
Yeah, well, let's start with self perception. You said it. Confident leaders acknowledge their strengths and weaknesses. They're open to feedback and willing to grow. Arrogant leaders, however, believe they know it all and often reject constructive criticism. So, this happened just this week, or just before we logged on. I pick Kristin's brain about social media things. She's got 100,000 followers, and it's me, my mom, and my cousins. And
Heck yeah.
no, I'm always trying to learn and grow and be curious and inquisitive. And if someone
Mhm.
has expertise that you don't have, you need to humble yourself and go to that person. I remember, Kristin, during the lockdown, I had to start conducting all these meetings, and we were using Teams. Now, I'd use Zoom
Oh yeah.
more than Teams, but I called one of my Gen Z employees and said, "Hey, how did you do this, that?" And they took pride in showing me. I took
Right.
pride in learning, and I didn't look like such an idiot when I'm conducting meetings. So we got
Yeah.
to be open. We got to learn.
Yeah. Yeah, we really do. I'm glad you bring that up. And the main thing is feel I don't know if you saw this play out, but it's great to reach out and ask for help. We need to then write down whatever they told us so that we remember it for the next time. So
Yeah.
I've seen it abused where people, my senior, they would ask 3 and 4 times the same exact thing. And I'd be like, all right, might want to jot this one down.
You know what? You know what's interesting, Kristin, too, about relationships is our Facebook administrator, Cassie Roop. I was talking to her about the coaching space, and somehow in that coaching, she mentioned that she had uploaded several books, audio books, to Amazon, or Audible. So anyway, guess who ended up uploading my audio book?
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah, there's people all around you that has expertise. We just have to. I teach a little
Yes.
thing called threading. You start to engage in conversation. You thread it to get information, and then you learn a lot about someone. They may have a lot
Right.
of talents that you
Right.
can use.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's fantastic.
I'm going to call that number 2, because you have to
Yeah.
interact
Right.
if you're a strong leader. You have to be able to take advice. You have to collaborate. You have
Mhm.
to appreciate other opinions. And I remember one time working for this very arrogant leader, and his line was always, "I don't want to hear it." So basically,
Lovely.
everyone else was wrong. He gaslit anyone that opposed him, and I don't want to hear it. So there you go.
So bad. Oh my goodness. Okay. So I'm going to go over a response to failure. And this is something, fear of failure is incredibly common. So this is how you respond to failure. So confident leaders are going to view failures as learning opportunities and are willing to take responsibility for that failure. Where on the other hand, arrogant leaders are often going to blame others or external circumstances when things go wrong. I'm sure we've all experienced that.
Yeah.
Oh, like take blame and then share the credit, right? Like that's where we should be.
Yeah. Take the blame, share the credit.
Now, oh, sorry, Ron.
No, you go ahead.
I apologize for cutting you off. I'm going to take the blame for that. It happens. All right. So before we get into some real life experiences, Ron, I know our listeners want to know the difference in arrogance and narcissism. Narcissism, excuse me, is very popular amongst our listeners. They love learning about it.
I think that's our number one word, narcissism.
Totally.
So while both arrogance and narcissism involve a sense of self-importance, arrogance is a trait characterized by an inflated sense of self and a disregard for others, while narcissism is more complex because we've told you sociopaths, psychopaths have elements of narcissism in there.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a personality disorder. And not only do they think they're better than others, they have these grandiose ideas that, that's how cults start, that there's that God or the universe, as many of them say, has granted them these special powers and all of this stuff. They absolutely need admiration to survive. And they have a full lack of empathy, where arrogant leaders still have feelings. And sometimes they have some downtime around their family. They can chill out, relax. They don't have a constant need for this adulation or admiration.
Mm-hmm.
But narcissists, it's their world.
It's a drug.
And it's like a drug. And it's certainly a mental health disorder.
Oh, yeah.
So, glad you asked that question.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, I'm going to give a few real life examples where arrogance has turned into dishonesty. And so you remember Enron, Ron?
Oh, yeah.
I remember this. That was like, and then oh my gosh, so many spinoff shows about Enron and how it went down. Really helped drive it home for all ages. So I remember when this happened. Gosh, I don't even remember the year. I feel like I was in my early 20s though. And I just found it fascinating on how something like this could happen. So the former CEO, Kenneth Lay, he oversaw one of history's most notorious business scandals. So he encouraged an aggressive and immoral culture, and it emphasized quick money, dishonest business dealings. And under his direction, Enron hid enormous debts, and they falsified financial reports, misled investors. Oh my goodness. That's like, we've seen so many issues where investors have been misled play out on TV and in movies. Really, trust in the business world has been damaged, I would say, at least for the next 100 years, due to Enron's final collapse. And it resulted in significant financial losses for those investors and employees. So a lesson, if you can pull a lesson out of that, which you can pull many, a leader must place a high priority on moral behavior, honesty, and responsibility. There has to be humility there as well. Financial data manipulation and a contempt for moral and legal boundaries can and will have disastrous results.
You know, Kristin, what Kenneth Lay did and had others doing, they call that cooking the books, but it is so common for people to inflate their assets to get loans, or they want to diminish assets to avoid taxes.
Right.
These things happen a lot. And what had happened is it just kept business after business cook the books.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was no regulations. It was just a free-for-all. And then all of a sudden when this hit, everyone had egg in their face. There was no oversight.
Right.
People were allowing us. And even the investors, they didn't ask for validation like we talk about. They didn't ask for let me see the real books, any of that. So this one was the perfect storm. And that's why I put that in this episode. It's old. You're right. It is kind of old now, but it laid the way for policies, procedures, systems to be put in place so that people can actually go on and verify, because this was the early days of the computer, but they were going in and you could go into a computer and look at what appeared to be real books, and they had been falsified. So there are some things that have happened positive as a result of that. But think about the aftermath of those kind of things. I mean, there were criminal convictions, the largest bankruptcy in history. People literally lost their pension. Imagine you walk in one day, Kristin, and they say, you've lost your job, you lost your pension, and it's all because of one arrogant leader who got the ball rolling. And that's the thing, is arrogance grows into toxicity and it can turn into narcissism, where it gets to be a total mental health issue. And so there were some positives at the end, but so many lives were destroyed.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I know we'll find that most regulations come from something negative.
Most do.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
There are some that are proactive, but most are a response to, at least I saw that in banking constantly. It was a response to something that had happened. They're like, oh, let's make sure that doesn't happen again, or at least at that scale. So like I said, most of them made sense. I only like rules that make sense, and most in banking did.
Well, here's the thing, Kristin. It's just like Doge. Elon Musk is doing, looking at all the government waste that I knew for years and years, and many, most people knew that there was waste, but now we're peeling the curtain back. When you're dealing with billions of dollars, or you're dealing with other people's money, there needs to be some regulations. They need to be smart. They need to be concise. And so that part of regulations, I don't discredit, but you're exactly right. What happens is you start putting a regulation, then you regulate that regulation, and something else pops up. And then the next thing you know, you can't get anything done. And that's not what we're talking about.
Right. Yep. That's where the red tape comes in that you have to cut through. All right. So you may be wondering how to cultivate confidence while steering clear of arrogance. It's probably a good thing for us to learn. So we're going to give you a few tips here. You want to practice self-awareness. We've talked about that numerous times in previous episodes. You want to regularly reflect on your actions and how they affect others. With that, you want to seek feedback, encourage your team. And this can be, if you're not a leader and you're aspiring to be one, this can be your peers, but you want to encourage those around you to provide input and to be open to it, right? They need to feel comfortable that you're going to be open to that feedback, right?
Kristin, I wanted to share this. If you're a leader and you're listening, if people come to you and their body language, they're nervous, they seem to be anxious about sharing an idea, or if they use words like, don't be mad, please don't think I'm being disrespectful. If they have to do that with you, if they have to preface all their statements with that, then you probably are an arrogant leader, or you're overbearing. Now, if it's a brand new employee, they don't know you, I get it. But if you hear those types of things regularly and you see that type of body language, you need to lighten up. You need to provide some psychological safety for these people to share their ideas and give you feedback.
Right. That's as you're talking, I'm like reflecting, has anyone done that with me? I feel like I've had employees in the past who are just timid by nature too. Like, you're going to have people that are just that way. And you do need to go out of your way to make them comfortable, just to get at the baseline. To Ron's point, you have to be open to it either way. And you have to make sure, if you're seeing that, figure out why. If they're just wired that way, make them comfortable with you. Have that conversation.
And you got to coach them until they are. You can't constantly walk on eggshells, and I'm sure you did that.
Oh, yeah.
But self-awareness is something that's vital. I'll tell you, this happened this week, Kristin, is we had our monthly coaches call. It's for certified coaches only. And we do some fun stuff in there, but we usually have, we discuss best practices, or we have something that we talk about or do a little bit of training. And so I sent out the Zoom invite Dr. Marissa was out of the country. She came back in. She sends a reminder. So I do the invite. She sends a reminder. Well, she had the original Zoom link. So we sent 2 different Zoom links. People are trying to log in. I was a little frustrated.
Oh, no.
So once we get on, she finally gets in. We did our thing, good meeting. But after I got off, I was thinking, we gotta work this out. I went back and read the original email, which had a message from me that said, this will be our Zoom link throughout.
Got it. Yeah.
So she was following what I said.
Right.
I thought she screwed up.
Oh,
So
no.
I had to send an email and I said, hey, next month we're going to send out another Zoom link that will be our link. And that was my mistake this week, creating a new link. So it's interesting that sometimes you can think someone else is at fault when you're actually at fault.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I didn't apologize, of course. Let's not get ridiculous. But it was supposed to be funny, Kristin.
I'm like, it took me a second. I hope you're.
I don't
was
believe in
waiting for a smile.
I don't believe in over apologizing. I did say I inadvertently did this because I apologize for things if I did something to hurt someone. If I make a mistake, that's different.
Right.
That was an inadvertent
exactly.
mistake.
You address it and then you can move on.
And you move on. That's right.
I think it's good so you talk about over apologizing. I mean, I want to hear it from you because I already know what the negative impacts can be if you over apologize as a leader. But what's your take on that?
Well, it also creates, it makes you subordinate to someone in an extreme way. If you've got people that are always apologizing, you almost always know that they're insecure. They're going to do whatever you tell them to do usually, and they're not going to give you any pushback. So people like that get dominated. But as a leader, if you want to be respected, I just hear people use sorry way too much. Like, sorry if this is something you don't want to hear. Well, why are you sorry? So this is how I do apologies, Kristin. If I did something that hurt you, that intentionally hurt you, that's an I'm sorry. If I made a mistake in a procedure or work or whatever, that is an inadvertent mistake, and that's what I call it. I didn't mean to do that. So I think it's almost you personalize it to decide, did I do something to hurt someone or did I make a mistake? And that's my line. And I can tell you this, Kristin, when I stopped apologizing as much, it did increase my credibility. Not that you don't take the blame. It's just the way you verbalize things and the way you conduct yourself that builds respect.
Yes. I'm so glad you elaborated on that because that is a balance. And I know as an early leader, I definitely over apologized. And because you're figuring out your place, you don't want to come in and be the dictator that you've had in the past, right? But then you had that friendship with a lot of the folks, and so you're still trying to be liked. After a few years, you realize that that's not going to happen. You're never going to be full, but it is
Kristin,
a balance. It's a balance.
Let me throw in one other thing.
Yeah, please do.
You also don't apologize for things outside of your control. I'm sorry, there's a hurricane coming.
That would be weird.
I was being extreme, but people apologize for things that are beyond their control. I'm sorry, but corporate has said we have to implement this policy.
Right.
I'm not apologizing for corporate. We have to implement this policy according to corporate, period.
Right.
Not I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Right. And I would do stuff like that because stuff came down from corporate all the time that I had to relay to my team, and I knew they weren't going to like it. What I would do is I would say, all right, we have 5 minutes to bitch and moan to each other right now. If you have any grief over this, here's your chance, but it's not going away. So get that out of your system, and then we're going to move forward. And I think they appreciated that because it was allowing them to be human, but it was also setting the stage that we're going to enforce this because this is what we're required to do at this point.
I think that's an interesting concept. And it is probably healthy as long as I don't say anything too extreme. I'm going to murder the CEO. Okay.
Well,
I feel better.
that would not, I feel bad.
That's
that would have been,
Yeah. I usually had a pretty large group when I was doing staff meetings, so I didn't want to do that, but I like that. That's interesting.
Yeah. I know. I hate to say the B word, but a bitch fest, right? You'd rather, at least my take on it was, I'd rather this be happening in my presence so that I can address something that might have been misconstrued. I don't want to leave the room and then have them taking up all these side conversations
Agreed.
where they couldn't be addressed. At least I was there. And then they also saw like, hey, you know what? She is the messenger when it comes to this, and she's also not going to let us not do it. Right. So it's like, it was pretty successful, I would say.
I kind of used what I call the soft landing, where I would say, I know this won't be popular, but corporate wants us to implement. That way it doesn't make you look aloof. If you look aloof, like you don't get it, that's not good either. You have to show some empathy and concern. Like, or I know this is going to have a difficult impact for some of you, but here's what we have to do.
Right.
Not, I'm so sorry. Corporate is, making mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think those are both great.
All right. We're winding down here, folks. Let's take a look at some of the aftermath of arrogant leaders. We've all seen this. And by the way, Kristin,
Ron, what do you think an arrogant leader would sound like when they're talking about a corporate message?
Oh, they would. they always want to act like they're in the decision making.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I was talking to corporate, and this is what we have to do. That's seriously,
totally.
That's how they have to do it. They speak on behalf of corporate.
Yeah.
So,
like they're up there on the C-suite.
Yeah, I'm getting Michael Scott vibes again. So we better move on from The Office.
Oh, goodness.
So some of the aftermath, the reason it's interesting, Ron's rants that I do on social media, I'd kind of run out. Well, I've got a new batch that have come in, so I'm going to have to bring out the phone camera and get those in. Yeah. No, I shake my head when I get those, and I'm like, are you kidding me? But yes, it still happens. So when you have an arrogant leader, it diminishes morale. Mm-hmm. And Kristin, at some point, most adults have worked for an arrogant leader, and they can see how it affects. And it changes the culture. You have the brown nosers who are falling all over themselves, trying not to offend the arrogant leader. Right. Then you've got the others who are neutral and just miserable. And then you got those who take a stand. That's usually the three categories when people are working for an arrogant leader, and they're all three negative, frankly. Mm-hmm. So people also make a lot of mistakes because you don't get the best out of people. You're not collaborating. Right. You're not getting the thought leader. You're getting whoever that you like the most, basically, or who gives you the least slack. A lack of employee retention. We've said it over and over. We'll repeat it one last time. People leave managers, not bosses.
Right.
I'm sorry, not companies, but their manager.
Right. Yeah.
Why don't you take the next one?
Yeah. So there, it's funny. You just shared this on our Instagram page for the Dirty Side of Leadership. My mom had sent me this, and it said, nothing kills a good employee's morale more than watching their boss put up with a bad employee. Something I paraphrase, but and that just really made me think of it. That I made that mistake before. I let someone get away with too much because they were, great on so many levels, but just not doing well. And so I think that those things really resonate with me, and we have to think about, have I done that, and how do I avoid that going forward? But something else, the aftermath of an arrogant leader, there's a lack of creativity amongst the team, because there isn't that, you've talked about this, that psychological safety net for people to share their creative ideas. They're nervous that they're going to be shot down either in front of a group of people. Even one-on-one makes some people nervous. Absolutely. That fear of failure sets in. There's also a loss of money. And, it's difficult for companies to thrive if they don't have folks who've challenged the status quo. Right? You have to be willing to have your voice be heard. You talked about last episode or a few episodes ago that they had different companies had the ability for employees to submit can do betters. Like, I think we could do better or be more efficient. Yeah. So that was last episode, right? So, and different companies named these boxes different things. And I know one of my banks had it too, where you could submit something. And it was basically, I think you can do better in this, and here's how you can do it, like more efficiently. But that's challenging the status quo in a respectful way. You want to go over the
most of the time businesses lose money, but there are some businesses, depending on the company, they believe that if you're just hard on your employees, you keep them working, you're going to make more money, and you do that in the short term. Yeah. But then it begins to get toxic. And I added this, Kristin, because I saw it so many times, and even in the Ron's rants, it's the well-being. There are people who literally get sick because they think they're going to get fired every day. Morale is so low. I talked to someone who broke out in hives every Sunday night because of dreading Monday. And that's really sad that people dread Monday that bad that they're breaking out in hives.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, we want to encourage leaders to always do that self-inflection. There's areas that I've made mistakes. I know people listening have made mistakes, but most of these can be corrected with some self-inflection, a good conversation. As we've said, take the blame, share the credit, start making those adjustments if you need to. And if you are working for a toxic leader, then you've got to take steps to check on your well-being, because it's not going to get better. That cortisol gets released in your system, and it's going to, over a long period of time, it's going to give you health scares and possibly lead to early death. I mean, it's that serious.
It is. So, it is. And I know the saying is a little tired, but life is too short to be living that way. And so if you are experiencing physical or emotional symptoms like that, you really have to check in with yourself and see what changes can be made. And some people, I retire in 9 years. Okay, that's a long time. That's like, right? Like, I get it. But so I definitely think we as a collective, just like in the United States and a lot of countries that have this, like Japan, have this wild, like strong work ethic, right? And we just think that this is the way it is, to put your head down and go, even though you may be miserable. And, it doesn't have to be like that. There are adjustments that can be made. So on that, we're going to wrap up today's episode, but just remember that true leadership is about lifting others up while being secure in your own abilities. And confidence inspires while arrogance repels. Okay. I think of like an insect repellent. It keeps folks away, right? So you don't want to do that. Strive to be the leader who empowers and inspires, not one who intimidates.
I love it.
Yes.
All right, everybody. Be the leader you're meant to be.
We'll see you next week.
The Dirty Side of Leadership podcast is brought to you by Forward Operations. If you'd like to book Ron or Kristin for speaking events, training, or executive coaching, visit forwardoperations.com. Be the leader you're meant to be.